I fear these are going to be worse times than the pandemic. We're caught in the middle, and we're attached to Canada, but we're part of Washington State.
Near the northern border of the United States, in a place few ever paid much attention to, something once unimaginable is quietly becoming reality. In small towns swallowed by the bitter cold, many families are beginning to consider an option they had never before entertained: giving up their U.S. citizenship to join Canada. It may sound far-fetched, but for them, it is the outcome of a harsh truth. Everything began when the Trump administration slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian goods. The response from the North was swift. Canadians stopped crossing the border to shop, to travel, or to spend money, and the first blows did not land in Washington, but directly on the border towns, where everyday life had always depended on the constant flow of people back and forth. Almost overnight, restaurants stood empty, shops put up closed signs, and jobs vanished. Clearly, this was no longer just a border issue. It felt like a warning siren that America was slowly slipping out of control. When confidence in the future begins to crack, how long can we pretend that everything will simply return to normal? This is the story of 5 U.S. border towns, where residents are seriously weighing a future on the other side of the line. When most people think of the fallout from U.S.-Canada trade tensions, they picture factories, supply chains, or soaring consumer prices. Few realize that a single policy shift on paper can push an entire small community into a fight for survival. One of the hardest hit places is a tiny strip of land often forgotten by the rest of the country. Point Roberts. Tucked away in the far northwest corner of Washington State, it is completely cut off from the rest of the state. To get there, you have no choice but to pass through Canadian territory. For decades, life in Point Roberts has depended almost entirely on its neighbors in British Columbia. The steady stream of Canadian visitors kept the shops, cafes, and services alive. For locals, cross-border commerce was not just a choice, but a lifeline. Yet even before the 35% tariffs came into effect, signs of strain had begun to appear. Stricter border controls and a growing sense of caution among Canadians had already slowed traffic. When rising costs combined with political tension, visitor numbers collapsed. The tariff shock only made matters worse. Many shops that relied on Canadian customers saw revenues plunge by 60 to 70%. On some days, not a single customer walked through the door. This collapse has hit not only grocery stores and eateries, but also clinics, delivery services, and repair shops, all struggling as demand dries up. Many small business owners have had to consider temporary closures to cut costs. Locals, meanwhile, are tightening their belts, weighing every essential expense as household incomes shrink. Strangely enough, there was no panic, no shouting. Instead, there was quiet endurance. Some tried shifting to domestic U.S. shipping routes to avoid passing through Canada, but the approach proved both costly and complicated. Others turned to online sales, hoping to reach customers beyond the border region. With fewer than 1,000 residents, Point Roberts lays bare a sobering truth. Not every corner of America is equipped to withstand sudden shifts in federal policy. In places where geography and livelihoods are bound too tightly together, even a small jolt in trade can trigger a full-blown crisis. Now the town faces a series of tough questions: how to sustain an economy that has long depended on Canadian visitors, how to lure them back when prices are rising and border procedures have grown cumbersome, and, perhaps most importantly, how to ensure that residents here do not feel abandoned and cut off from the rest of the country. Point Roberts was once a convenient stop for Canadians looking to shop duty-free, pick up parcels, or simply enjoy a quiet afternoon by the sea. Today, with higher costs and increasingly burdensome border checks, many simply stay home. Even the cross-border delivery services, the lifeblood of the local economy, are seeing their orders dwindle. The ripple effects have spread throughout the community. Those who once invested in vacation properties, warehouses, or logistics hubs to serve the Canadian market now face empty buildings. Some families have been forced to put holiday homes up for sale or repurpose them into storage, waiting for a recovery that may never come. Yet in hardship, mindsets are shifting. Many residents are no longer waiting for Canadians to return, but are instead seeking more self-reliant ways to live. Launching digital services, producing organic goods, or starting small farms. Cooperatives, backyard gardens, and local food networks are no longer just lifestyle choices, but survival strategies. Still, one truth remains: not every community has the resources to adapt so quickly. Even simple needs like medical care or prescriptions in Point Roberts have become challenges, as residents must still cross Canadian territory to reach an American hospital. With trade barriers mounting, the cost of everything from food to healthcare has been driven sharply higher. Point Roberts may be just a tiny dot on the map, but it poses a profound question for the United States. When decisions are made at the national level, who ensures that small, remote communities still have the tools to survive? And as residents begin rewriting their own futures, will they receive the timely support needed to succeed? The town endures, not through economic reports or trade figures, but through resilience, adaptability, and a strong sense of community. And in the end, it forces us to ask ourselves, how do we keep the promise that no one will be left behind? Darby Line, Vermont. If Point Roberts is proof of geographic isolation, then Darby Line carries a more profound sorrow. The sorrow of a community that once believed itself to be a bridge, but has now become a wall. The town sits directly on the US-Canada border, fused tightly with Stansted, Quebec. Streets, houses, even buildings overlap across the line. The clearest symbol is the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, where the front door lies in the United States, but the stage belongs to Canada. For decades, residents moved about as if the border did not exist, yet that open atmosphere is now fading. Politics has changed everything. For generations, Darby Line was held up as the model of an unguarded frontier. Americans and Canadians fell in love, married, worked side by side, shopped together, even sent their children to the same schools. After 9/11, the town still kept rare streets marked only by a faint painted line instead of a border post. But when trade tensions flared under Trump, the cracks began to show. Fiery tweets, combative sound bites filled the airwaves. Then, in early July, came the 35% tariff, the final straw. For Darby Line, this was not just a headline. It cut directly into daily life. Canadians stopped crossing the border. Cafes once bustling with Quebec visitors suddenly emptied. People began to question, could the United States still be trusted as a friend? To them, tariffs were not just about economics, but a slap at mutual respect. Local leaders had no voice, no power to shift Washington's decisions. And so the town lost its lifeline, its neighbors across the street. The Haskell Free Library, once a cultural gathering place for both communities, now stands hollow. Where hundreds once read books or attended concerts, the seats sit cold and vacant. Canadians no longer feel welcome on the American side of the building. Nobody pushes them away, but the warmth that once defined the place has vanished. Darby Line has lost not only revenue, but also its sense of connection. Families with dual citizenship now face painful choices. Which side to choose? Cross-border jobs have disappeared. Mixed marriages feel the strain. Generational ties are fraying, unraveled by policies made in a capital city that many here believe doesn't even know they exist. Trump doesn't know we're here, an elderly man said. If he did, he wouldn't have signed that order. Or at least he would have thought of a way to protect us. But he didn't, and now it's too late. The idea that Canada might one day absorb the town is no longer a joke. It surfaces in community meetings, in closed Facebook groups, in whispered conversations. Some even talk about asking Quebec for help with infrastructure, healthcare, or food supplies if the situation drags on. A few openly propose special ties with Stansted to weather the hardship together. And the prospect of becoming Canadian is now seriously on the table. The irony is bitter. Darby Line was once celebrated worldwide as a beacon of US-Canada friendship. Today, it has become proof of what is lost when Washington ignores the value of small, voiceless communities. National media remains silent, and the cry from Darby Line goes unheard. If one day the town were to hold a symbolic vote to join Canada, it would not be a rash act. It would be the inevitable outcome of policies lacking vision, empathy, and even the slightest willingness to listen. The people here do not ask to be anyone's top priority. They only ask not to be forgotten. Niagara Falls, New York. Before Trump's 35% tariff took effect, more than 2 million Canadians came here every year, making up nearly half of all visitors. Alleys, souvenir shops, bars, and restaurants from Buffalo to the Falls thrived on that steady stream. Airbnb rentals, bus tours, shuttle services, all were booming. But when Ottawa called for a boycott of American goods and the border tightened, the Canadian crowds all but vanished. Within a single month, visitor numbers dropped by 60%. The city grew silent. Hotels slashed room rates from $230 to $90. Staff faced layoffs and reduced hours. The municipal budget shrank, forcing park, transit, and education projects to be put on hold. Student exchange and internship programs also froze. The ripple effects spread wide. Cuts to public healthcare made it harder for seniors and the unemployed to access services, while real estate once purchased for Airbnb rentals now sits empty. Many families have had to switch professions, while spa owners, casinos, and restaurants lost the bulk of their customers, 70% of whom had come from Ontario. The deeper wound, however, is emotional. Niagara had once been a symbol of US-Canada friendship. Now it feels hollow and lonely. Residents are asking, why sacrifice stability just to send a message to a neighbor?